to a fireside reading of A Passage to India. Part 2, Caves, Chapter 12. The Ganges, though flowing from the foot of Vishnu and through Siva's hair, is not an ancient stream. Geology, looking further than religion, knows of a time when neither the river nor the Himalayas that nourished it existed, and an ocean flowed over the holy place of Hindustan. The mountains rose, their debris silted up the ocean, the gods took their seats on them and contrived the river, and the India we call immemorial came into being. But India is really far older. In the days of the prehistoric ocean, the southern part of the peninsula already existed, and the high places of Dravidia have been land since land began, and have seen on the one side the sinking of a continent that joined them to Africa, and on the other the upheaval of the Himalayas from a sea. They are older than anything in the world. No water has ever covered them, and the sun, who has watched them for countless eons, may still discern in their outlines forms that were his before our globe was torn from his bosom. If flesh of the sun's flesh is to be touched anywhere, it is here, among the incredible antiquity of these hills. Yet even they are altering. As Himalayan India rose, this India, the primal, has been depressed and is slowly re-entering the curve of the earth. It may be that in eons to come, an ocean will flow here too and cover the sun-born rocks with slime. Meanwhile, the plain of the Ganges encroaches on them with something of the sea's action. They are sinking beneath the newer lands. Their main mass is untouched, but at the edge their outposts have been cut off and stand knee-deep, throat-deep in the advancing soil. There is something unspeakable in these outposts. They are like nothing else in the world, and a glimpse of them makes the breath catch. They rise abruptly, insanely, without the proportion that is kept by the wildest hills elsewhere. They bear no relation to anything dreamt or seen. To call them uncanny suggests ghosts, and they are older than all spirit. Hinduism has scratched and plastered a few rocks, but the shrines are unfrequented, as if pilgrims, who generally seek the extraordinary, had here found too much of it. Some sadhus did once settle in a cave, but they were smoked out, and even Buddha, who must have passed this way down to the bow tree of Gya, shunned a renunciation more complete than his own, and has left no legend of struggle or victory in the Malabar. The caves are readily described. A tunnel, 8 feet long, 5 feet high, 3 feet wide, leads to a circular chamber about 20 feet in diameter. This arrangement occurs again and again throughout the group of hills. And this is all. This is a Malabar cave. Having seen one such cave, having seen 2, having seen 3, 4, 14, 24, the visitor returns to Chandrapur uncertain whether he has had an interesting experience or a dull one, or any experience at all. He finds it difficult to discuss the caves or to keep them apart in his mind, for the pattern never varies, and no carving, not even a bee's nest or a bat, distinguishes one from another. Nothing attaches to them, and their reputation, for they have one, does not depend upon human speech. It is as if the surrounding plain or the passing birds have taken upon themselves to exclaim, "Extraordinary!" and the word has taken root in the air and been inhaled by mankind. They are dark caves. Even when they open towards the sun, very little light penetrates down the entrance tunnel into the circular chamber. There is little to see and no eye to see it until the visitor arrives for his 5 minutes and strikes a match. Immediately, another flame rises in the depths of the rock and moves towards the surface like an imprisoned spirit. The walls of the circular chamber have been most marvelously polished. The two flames approach and strive to unite, but cannot because one of them breathes the air, the other stone. A mirror inlaid with lovely colours divides the lovers. Delicate stars of pink and grey interpose, exquisite nebulae, shadings fainter than the tail of a comet or the midday moon. All the evanescent life of the granite, only here visible. Fists and fingers thrust above the advancing soil. Here at last is their skin, finer than any covering acquired by the animals, smoother than windless water, more voluptuous than love. The radiance increases. The flames touch one another, kiss, expire. The cave is dark again, like all the caves. Only the wall of the circular chamber has been polished thus. The sides of the tunnel are left rough. They impinge as an afterthought upon the internal perfection. An entrance was necessary, so mankind made one. But elsewhere, deeper in the granite, are there certain chambers that have no entrances? Chambers never unsealed since the arrival of the gods? Local report declares that these exceed in number those that can be visited, as the dead exceed the living, 400 of them, 4,000 or million. Nothing is inside them. They were sealed up before the creation of pestilence or treasure. If mankind grew curious and excavated, nothing would be added to the sum of good or evil. One of them is rumored within the boulder that swings on the summit of the highest of the hills, a bubble-shaped cave that has neither ceiling nor floor and mirrors its own darkness in every direction infinitely. If the boulder falls and smashes, the cave will smash too, empty as an Easter egg. The boulder, because of its hollowness, sways in the wind, and even moves when a crow perches upon it. Hence its name, and the name of its stupendous pedestal, the Kawa Doll. Chapter 13. These hills look romantic in certain lights and at suitable distances, and seen of an evening from the upper veranda of the club, they caused Miss Quested to say conversationally to Miss Derrick that she should like to have gone, that Dr. Aziz at Mr. Fielding's had said he would arrange something, and that Indians seem rather forgetful. She was overheard by the servant who offered them vermouths. This servant understood English, and he was not exactly a spy, but he kept his ears open, and Mahmud Ali did not exactly bribe him, but did encourage him to come and squat with his own servants, and would happen to stroll their way when he was there. As the story travelled, it accreted emotion, and Aziz learned with horror that the ladies were deeply offended with him and had expected an invitation daily. He thought his facile remark had been forgotten. Endowed with two memories, a temporary and a permanent, he had hitherto relegated the caves to the former. Now he transferred them once for all and pushed the matter through. They were to be a stupendous replica of the Tea Party. He began by securing Fielding and old Godbole, and then commissioned Fielding to approach Mrs. Moore and Miss Quested when they were alone. By this device, Ronnie, their official protector, could be circumvented. Fielding didn't like the job much. He was busy, caves bored him, he foresaw friction and expense, but he would not refuse the first favor his friend had asked from him, and did as required. The ladies accepted. It was a little inconvenient in the present press of their engagements. Still, they hoped to manage it after consulting Mr. Hislop. Consulted, Ronnie raised no objection, provided Fielding undertook full responsibility for their comfort. He was not enthusiastic about the picnic, but then no more were the ladies. No one was enthusiastic, yet it took place. Aziz was terribly worried. It was not a long expedition. A train left Chandrapur just before dawn. Another would bring them back for tiffin. But he was only a little official still and feared to acquit himself dishonorably. He had to ask Major Calendar for half a day's leave, and he refused because of his recent malingering. Despair, renewed approach of Major Calendar through Fielding, and contemptuous, snarling permission. He had to borrow cutlery from Mahmud Ali without inviting him. Then there was the question of alcohol. Mr. Fielding and perhaps the ladies were drinkers. So must he provide whiskey, sodas, and ports? There was the problem of transport from the wayside station of Marabar to the caves. There was the problem of Professor Godbole and his food, and of Professor Godbole and other people's food. Two problems, not one problem. The professor was not a very strict Hindu. He would take tea, fruit, soda water, and sweets, whoever cooked them, and vegetables and rice if cooked by a Brahmin, but not meat, not cakes, lest they contained eggs, and he would not allow anyone else to eat beef. A slice of beef upon a distant plate would wreck his happiness. Other people might eat mutton, they might eat ham, but over ham, Aziz's own religion raised its voice. He did not fancy other people eating ham. Trouble after trouble encountered him because he had challenged the spirit of the Indian earth, which tries to keep men in compartments. At last the moment arrived. His friends thought him most unwise to mix himself up with English ladies, and warned him to take every precaution against unpunctuality. Consequently, he spent the previous night at the station. The servants were huddled on the platform, enjoined not to stray. He himself walked up and down with old Mohammed Latif, who was to act as major domo. He felt insecure and also unreal. A car drove up, and he hoped Fielding would get out of it to lend him solidity, but it contained Mrs. Moore, Miss Quested, and their Goanese servant. He rushed to meet them, suddenly happy. "But you've come after all! Oh, how very, very kind of you!" he cried. "This is the happiest moment in all my life." The ladies were civil. It was not the happiest moment in their lives. Still, they looked forward to enjoying themselves as soon as the bother of the early start was over. They had not seen him since the expedition was arranged, and they thanked him adequately. "You don't require tickets. Please stop your servant. There are no tickets on the Marabar branch line. It is its peculiarity. You come to the carriage and rest till Mr. Fielding joins us. Did you know you are to travel Purda? Will you like that?" They replied that they should like it. The train had come in, and a crowd of dependents were swarming over the seats of the carriage like monkeys. Aziz had borrowed servants from his friends as well as bringing his own 3, and quarrels over precedence were resulting. The lady's servant stood apart with a sneering expression on his face. They had hired him while they were still globe-trotters at Bombay. In a hotel or among smart people he was excellent, but as soon as they consorted with anyone whom he thought second-rate, he left them to their disgrace. The night was still dark, but had acquired the temporary look that indicates its end. Perched on the roof of a shed, the station-master's hens began to dream of kites instead of owls. Lamps were put out in order to save the trouble of putting them out later. The smell of tobacco and the sound of spitting arose from third-class passengers in dark corners. Heads were unshrouded, teeth gleamed on the twigs of a tree. So convinced was a junior official that another sun would rise that he rang a bell with enthusiasm. This upset the servants. They shrieked that the train was starting and ran to both ends of it to intercede. Much had still to enter the Purda carriage: a box bound with brass, a melon wearing a fez, a towel containing guavas, a step-ladder, and a gun. The guests played up all right. They had no race consciousness. Mrs. Moore was too old, Miss Quested too new, and they behaved to Aziz as to any young man who had been kind to them in the country. This moved him deeply. He had expected them to arrive with Mr. Fielding, instead of which they trusted themselves to be with him a few moments alone. "Send back your servant," he suggested. "He is unnecessary. Then we shall all be Muslims together." "And he is such a horrible servant. Anthony, you can go. We don't want you," said the girl impatiently. "Master told me to come." "Mistress tells you to go." "Master says keep near the ladies all the morning." "Well, your ladies won't have you." She turned to the host. "Do get rid of him, Dr. Aziz." "Mohammed Latif," he called. The poor relative exchanged fezzes with the melon and peeped out of the window of the railway carriage, whose confusion he was superintending. "Here is my cousin, Mr. Mohammed Latif. Oh, no, don't shake hands. He is an Indian of the old-fashioned sort. He prefers to salam. There, I told you so. Mohammed Latif, how beautifully you salam. See, he hasn't understood. He knows no English." "You speak lie," said the old man gently. "I speak a lie. Oh, jolly good. Isn't he a funny old man? We will have great jokes with him later. He does all sorts of little things. He is not nearly as stupid as you think, and awfully poor. It's lucky ours is a large family." He flung an arm round the grubby neck. "But you get inside, make yourselves at home. Yes, you lie down." The celebrated Oriental confusion appeared at last to be at an end. "Excuse me, now I must meet our other 2 guests." He was getting nervous again, for it was 10 minutes to the time. Still, Fielding was an Englishman, and they never do miss trains. And Godbole was a Hindu and did not count. And soothed by this logic, he grew calmer as the hour of departure approached. Mohammed Latif had bribed Anthony not to come. They walked up and down the platform, talking usefully. They agreed that they had overdone the servants and must leave 2 or 3 behind at Marabar station. And Aziz explained that he might be playing 1 or 2 practical jokes at the caves, not out of unkindness, but to make the guests laugh. The old man assented with slight sideway motions of the head. He was always willing to be ridiculed, and he bade Aziz not spare him. Elated by his impotence, he began an indecent anecdote. "Tell me another time, brother, when I have more leisure, for now, as I've already explained, we have to give pleasure to non-Muslims. 3 will be Europeans, 1 a Hindu, which must not be forgotten. Every attention must be paid to Professor Godbole, lest he feel that he is inferior to my other guests. I will discuss philosophy with him. That will be kind of you, but the servants are even more important. We must not convey an impression of disorganization. It can be done, and I expect you to do it. A shriek from the Puradak carriage. The train had started. Merciful God! Cried Mohammed Latif. He flung himself at the train and leapt onto the footboard of a carriage. Aziz did likewise. It was an easy feat, for a branch-line train is slow to assume special airs. We're monkeys, don't worry, he called, hanging on to a bar and laughing. Then he howled, Mr. Fielding! Mr. Fielding! There were Fielding and old Godbole held up at the level crossing. Appalling catastrophe. The gates had been closed earlier than usual. They leapt from their tonga, they gesticulated, but what was the good? So near and yet so far. As the train joggled past over the points, there was time for agonized words. Bad! Bad! You have destroyed me! Godbole's puja did it, cried the Englishman. The Brahmin lowered his eyes, ashamed of religion, for it was so. He had miscalculated the length of a prayer. Jump on! I must have you! Screamed Aziz beside him. Right! Give a hand! He's not to. He'll kill himself, Mrs. Moore protested. He jumped. He failed, missed his friend's hand, and fell back onto the line. The train rumbled past. He scrambled onto his feet and bawled after them, I'm all right. You're all right. Don't worry. And then they passed beyond range of his voice. Mrs. Moore, Miss Quested, our expedition is ruined. He swung himself along the footboard almost in tears. Get in, you'll kill yourself as well as Mr. Fielding. I see no ruin. How is that? Oh, explain to me, he said piteously, like a child. We shall be all Muslims together now, as you promised. She was perfect, as always, his dear Mrs. Moore. All the love for her he had felt at the mosque welled up again, the fresher for forgetfulness. There was nothing he would not do for her. He would die to make her happy. Get in, Dr. Aziz, you make us giddy, the other lady called. If they're so foolish as to miss the train, that's their loss, not ours. I am to blame. I am the host. Nonsense. Go to your carriage. We're going to have a delightful time without them. Not perfect, like Mrs. Moore, but very sincere and kind. Wonderful ladies, both of them, and for one precious morning, his guests. He felt important and competent. Fielding was a loss personally, being a friend, increasingly dear, yet if Fielding had come, he himself would have remained in leading strings. Indians are incapable of responsibility, said the officials, and Hamidullah sometimes said so too. He would show those pessimists that they were wrong. Smiling proudly, he glanced outward at the country, which was still invisible except as a dark movement in the darkness, then upwards at the sky, where the stars of the sprawling Scorpion had begun to pale. Then he dived through a window into a second-class carriage. Mohammed Latif, by the way, what is in these caves, brother? Why are we all going to see them? Such a question was beyond the poor relative's scope. He could only reply that God and the local villagers knew, and that the latter would gladly act as guides. Thank you all for joining me. More not tomorrow, Saturday at 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram Live. All the chapters uploaded to the YouTube channel, Fireside Reading. And please subscribe and comment if you'd like. Lots of people are subscribing at the moment, which is lovely. And I will see you all in 2 days. Have a very lovely Friday. But until Saturday, everyone, please stay very, very well. Goodbye.